What's going on, guys? Billy here, and today we're going to go over some of the different options for the customizable buttons on the Mavic Pro. First, I'll tell you guys what they all mean, and then after that, I'll show you guys the optimal setup for your customizable buttons and the ones that I use. Our first set of buttons that can be customized are on the back of the remote. These are known as the C1 and the C2 buttons. Next, we have the 5 directional button, also known as the 5D button. This is located on the front of the drone and gives you 5 separate options as you can push it in, up, down, left, or right. To find out where we can customize these buttons, first of all, click on the 3 dots in the top right corner to access the general settings. From there, click on the remote controller settings and slide down. First of all, you'll notice that we have the C2 and C1 button customization, and then we have the 5D button customization. The options that we have to choose from for the C1 and C2 buttons are turn on/off front LEDs, sensor weighted metering, AE lock/unlock, advanced camera settings, camera forward/down, gimbal follow/FPV mode, toggle map/live view, battery info, navigation, playback, sensor autofocus, right dial ISO/shutter control, and not defined. As for the 5D buttons, we get a fairly limited list. We have camera forward/down, zoom in, zoom out, portrait mode, focusing/metering, and AE lock. To start things off, let's go through an explanation of all the different options we have for the C buttons. The first option that we have is turn on or off front LEDs. With this option, we can simply turn on or off the 2 front LEDs on the Mavic Pro with the touch of a button. If the LEDs are turned on, we can simply tap the button once to turn them off. To turn them back on, all we need to do is tap the button again. Now, this can be good for someone who's trying to take pictures and still wants the LEDs to be on when they're trying to fly around and find a good spot for that perfect picture. Next up, we have sensor weighted metering. Now, metering is a term that has to do with exposure. Basically, it allows you to tap on the screen, and from there, the camera will set an exposure value that's perfect to film whatever you've selected. Now, getting back to the first 2 words, sensor weighted, basically this will take the exposure value of whatever's selected in the middle rather than having to tap around the screen. Once we hit the button that has sensor weighted metering assigned to it, we'll notice that it takes the exposure value of whatever's in the middle, setting the exposure value perfect so that it's not too over or too underexposed. Metering only works when you're in automatic camera mode. If you switch over to manual, you're basically setting the exposure yourself when you set the values of ISO and shutter. With that being said, I would not recommend setting this to one of the customizable buttons unless you're shooting with automatic camera settings. Next up, we have AE lock/unlock. Now, AE stands for auto exposure, and basically this is going to allow you to lock the exposure to keep the brightness even across the screen. Clicking the button has been assigned AE lock/unlock can be monitored in the top right corner with the box that has the lock icon and says AE. If it's blue, auto exposure lock is turned on, and if it's white, it's turned off. Now, we'll notice that when we switch over to manual camera settings, the box in the top right corner I told you to pay attention to is now totally grayed out. This implies auto exposure is only used with automatic camera settings. Next up, we have advanced camera settings. We can access this menu by clicking a button on the back of the controller rather than having to tap on the screen. Tapping the assigned button on the back will make the menu shoot up from the side just as if you've tapped on the screen. Up next, we have camera forward/down. This will allow the camera to look straight forward or straight down with the click of a button almost instantaneously. This is perfect for whenever you're trying to land. If the camera is looking forward and we tap the button that's been assigned, camera forward/down, we'll notice that the camera will look straight down. As I said, this is really good for when you're landing and you need to see what's underneath of you. When we tap that button again, the camera will look straight back forward. Next up, we have toggle map/live view, and this will allow you to switch between the camera feed and the map in the bottom left corner with the click of a button rather than having to tap on the screen. I'll show this to you guys, but I don't want to give away my personal address. This can be fairly useful if you want to quickly check where your drone has flown. Next up, we've got battery info, and this will allow you to check up on your battery, the status of it, such as the milliamp hours left, as well as the voltage. You can do this all by clicking a button rather than having to dig through the settings. Just like with the advanced camera settings option, the battery menu will shoot out from the right side. Next up we have navigation, and at first I thought that this was going to be kind of a way to see where your drone has navigated or something like that, but all it does is simply bring up the intelligent flight modes. Once we tap on the button, we'll notice that all the intelligent flight modes pop up, allowing you to easily choose which one you'd like to fly in. Next up we have playback, and this will allow you to see what you've recorded on your SD card simply by clicking the button on the back of the controller. In my opinion, this is kind of a waste of a button, as there's plenty of different options that are much more valuable to choose from. Next up we have center autofocus, which will allow you to focus the camera on the drone by clicking a button rather than tapping on the middle of the screen. It's so much easier being able to tap the button on the back of the controller to focus the camera rather than having to take my hand off of the controller and tap the screen. Next up we've got right dial ISO / shutter control, and this will allow you to change what the dial on the right side of the remote will control, the ISO or the shutter. In automatic camera settings this won't work, as we don't need to manually set the ISO or the shutter, but when we select our manual camera settings we're then able to simply click the button on the back so we can choose between ISO or shutter. We'll notice that in the top right corner, whichever selected in blue will be the one that we're controlling. Now let's move on to our 5D button customization. Our first option is camera forward / down. Just like the C button customization, we can look downwards or upwards with the touch of a button. Next up we have zoom in, which allows you to zoom in on an image or video. The first thing you need to know is that digital zoom is not supported in 4K, therefore we're going to have to move over to 1080p. DJI claims that even when fully zoomed in there's no quality loss, you're still going to get a nice 1080p image, and this is going to be good if you need to zoom in close to something that you particularly can't fly your drone close to. Next up we have zoom out, which you always want to have assigned to one of the customizable buttons if you have zoom in assigned to another, as you don't always want to be stuck on a full zoom. We'll notice that just like the zoom in feature, every single time that we click the button we zoom out by 0.1 times. Next up we have portrait mode, which changes the orientation of the photo, allowing you to take a picture that looks like it was taken with a smartphone. Now this isn't limited to just pictures, you can also take videos while in portrait mode. Something that's interesting that I've noticed is when you click the button to go into portrait mode, the whole entire camera rotates around. The next option that we have is focus / metering. I do want to mention really quickly that this will only work with manual focus and manual camera settings. If you have autofocus and auto camera settings enabled, or even just one of them, this won't work. With the simple click of a button we can change between choosing our manual focal point or choosing the exposure meter. The final option we have is AE lock, and you should be fairly familiar with this as this is available on the C customizable buttons. Just as a quick recap, we want to take a look in the top right corner where it has the lock symbol and the letters AE. If it's blue, that means that auto exposure lock is on, and if it's white, it means that it's off. We can choose this by simply clicking the button if we have this assigned to one of the 5D buttons. Now let's take a look at the customizations that I use. To start things off, we'll look at the C buttons. On my C1 button, I use center autofocus. This is a lot easier than having to take one hand off of the remote to tap the screen and focus the camera. On the C2 button, I use battery info so I can get a clear reading of how many milliamp hours I have left, just to be a little bit more precise than the percentage reading it gives you in the top right corner on the main screen. Now moving on to my 5D button customizations, first of all for upper and lower I use zoom in and zoom out. This feels nice to me as it really does feel like when I'm pushing up I'm zooming in, and when I'm pulling it downwards I'm zooming out. As for pushing the 5D button to the left, I have it set to portrait mode, and towards the right I have it for camera forward and down. I would have to say that I really don't use the left and right all that much, but I do have them there just in case I do need to use them. So guys, that about wraps this video up. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here, as I have been trying to upload daily. Also make sure to leave a comment down below if you have any questions. Also let me know what your customizations are. I love to hear what you guys are using. So guys, as I said, this video is coming to an end, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.